What's up, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the Well Man's Podcast. My name is Brian Brosey. I'm joined by my friend and co-host, Keone Tita. And today we're joined by a very special guest, Robert Plotkin. Robert is the founder of Technology for Mindfulness. He teaches people how to be less distracted by their smartphones and how to retake control over their time to be more focused, productive, and creative. He has written several books on the social impact of computer technology, is a co-founder of the Hack Your Mind program at MIT, and the host of Technology for Mindfulness podcast. Robert, thank you for joining the show.
Oh, thanks, Brian. Thanks, Keone, for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, we're definitely excited to have you on. So first of all, can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing on a day-to-day basis and how you kind of found your way into this?
Yeah, I found my way into helping people to battle distraction and stress and anxiety online from having to deal with it myself. This is not something I work on full time. It's a real passion of mine, but my day job is a patent attorney. I help high-tech companies in the computer industry, internet companies, hardware companies get patents. So I both have to use technology in my business. I interact with people who are developing and using technology, and I have to do very deep, focused work. So all of that is a real challenge when you put all those pieces together, And for people who've only been using technology in the age of the internet, which maybe feels like it's been going on forever, they may not know that there was a time before the internet, and I remember it well, when using a computer could be something that was a very focused, enhancing experience. If that sounds shocking to people, I remember sitting down, at a green screen computer, no internet connection, no multiple windows open, no notifications popping up, and just writing, for hours at a time. And felt like I could really get in that zone. People call it the state of flow, whatever you call it. And then that was gradually eroded, first with the internet and email, then the web came along, then mobile devices, high-speed internet available everywhere, on and on and on, as all of these, quote, features and improvements, and your audience can't see me putting these words in quotes, all of this, quote, progress came along. It was great in many ways, but it was a killer for focus and productivity. And it's also a huge contributor to stress, anxiety, even depression. We can laugh about it, but it's a contributing factor in a lot of really harmful habits and consequences for us. And, another part of my background, so I studied computer science at MIT, I've been a patent lawyer for 20 years. I live and breathe high tech. But another side of me is that I've studied martial arts since I was a kid. And I'm really grateful that I did that because I realized along the way that I could bring a lot of the skills from martial arts training to working with technology. And, I think you could relate to it if I say, how does it feel when your smartphone beeps at you? Does it feel like you're getting attacked? It does to me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Your chest tightens up or your breathing stops. You have a physiological response that is very much like your response to getting attacked or feeling the threat of an attack.
Especially if it's my mother.
And when one experience lots of us have now, which can feel confusing, is that we go to our smartphone to do something enjoyable. We go to watch a video or text a friend or do something else that we want to do that's fun, and we do that. But then an hour later, we wake up and we say, well, what was I just doing? We get sucked into doing more and more of the same thing or other things, a different video. We see an article somewhere or a game. Our attention gets pulled and we stop being in control of what we're doing and we end up being controlled. And, I remember a number of years ago, it occurred to me, thought back to a lesson from one of my main karate teachers who would say that when someone attacks you, you just respond instinctively, then you just end up being a puppet to the attacker. I don't know about you. I'll date myself. I remember watching Kung Fu theater back in the 70s.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
And one thing I remember, these are not very high quality movies necessarily. And, the fight scenes were very formulaic, and it would be two people, punch, 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 kick, 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 and the other person would be blocking, perfectly every attack as if they predicted it, right, to come. And then at some point, that one attacker would stop and the other person would go back, throw 20, 30 kicks, and everyone block, 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 block. And you were supposed to be impressed with this. Why? You'd think, oh, wow, I'd love to be able to just block so expertly everything that's coming my way. Right. And in a sense, there's some skill to that. But what the insight my teacher tried to convey to us is, if every time you're attacked, you just block, you can get lulled into feeling like you're in control because you're not getting hit. But really, you're just being a puppet to the attacker, right? If the attacker wants you to move your arm to the right, he just throws a punch to the right, and you move your arm to the right. You block, but he's dictating your movements.
Yeah. Right.
And there's an illusion of control, and I think it's a lot like that with how we interact with our smartphones. All right. I'm a big user of email. I know a lot of people have moved on from email, but I don't care what messaging system you use. Mm-hmm. You sit down, and if for an hour you power through all those messages and you feel like I'm being really productive, right? I knocked out all these responses. I respond to all that. I did them really quickly. In a narrow sense, you're being productive. But if at the end of that hour, you step back and say, you know what, at the beginning of that hour, was that what I sat down intending to do? Right. If the answer is no, then you're just like that person in the Kung Fu Theater movie. Block, 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 block. You respond, 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 respond. You feel like you're being productive, but you didn't do what you set out to do. So you're just being controlled by the messages coming at you. You're only reacting to them. In the mindfulness world, there's often a distinction made between reacting and responding. And in English, those may sound like the same thing. But when you react, it's an instinctive, reflexive type of action that's dictated by the stimulus that's coming at you. You're acting like an automaton in a way. Mm-hmm. So when you respond, you're able to pause and make a choice about how to respond to it. I'll give you an analogy in the self-defense or martial arts context to make it concrete, right? Someone throws a punch at you. It would be a higher level of, so you can block, but if you just do that reactively, right? Think about why a fake or a feint works, in boxing. Someone starts throwing a jab at you and pulls it back, and your hand goes out to block, right? Then they throw the real punch somewhere else at you. Mm-hmm. The right. Fake works because you have trained yourself to reflexively move in response to what you think is coming your way, right? The higher level of skill is to be able to pause, see the punch starting to come at you and say, let me see where this goes before I do anything. Right. Or, he's punching to my face. I'm going to kick him in the shin before the punch lands. I'm going to move out of the way. Do something that's of your own choice, that's not purely dictated. It's not equal, opposite, and immediately in response to the attack. So that's how you break out of that cycle of immediate puppet-like reaction. And I'll stop there, but just to say that there's a whole variety of things we can do with technology that are like that, and that's the way to break out of the rabbit hole that you get sucked down in when you're on Instagram or Facebook or Netflix or pick your poison, whatever it is. Right. That's how you break out.
Robert, I see that in a lot of areas of life too. I mean, we do a lot of people, I do a lot of diet counseling and nutrition, and people use that same analogy. I feel like I'm a puppet to food. Yeah. Or I feel like I'm a puppet at my job or whatever. It's amazing how many times we go through life, feeling like that and feeling like we're being pulled. But for me personally, online, it's a trip because you get online and maybe you intend to have a task at hand, and the internet with all your notifications just seems to be pulling you in different directions. Like, it's like that's what marketing is, right? Trying to divert your attention away. So with technology, it seems like it's a double-edged sword, right? I mean, it can really help you, I would think, in some ways, but you have to really be aware of not getting caught up into the negative side of that. And so how do we do that?
I agree. It's all about balance. I would say managing rather than eliminating technology. I certainly wouldn't suggest to anyone that we just get rid of all of our technology.
Right.
Just like with food or alcohol or other things, there's a variety of kinds of habits you can develop. One of them, which I know people use with other types of habits, even addictions, and I'll use another saying from a different martial arts teacher of mine many years ago, which is applicable to all of these things. He'd say, it's better, when you're attacked, it's better to block than to get hit. Okay, True enough, right? Rather to block than get punched in the face. Better to move out of the way than to block. Better not to be there in the first place than to move out of the way. Okay.
Right.
So, I've got a sweet tooth. And in fact, my main New Year's resolution this year was to cut down radically on sugar. I didn't decide to eliminate it, but the thing that's works best for me is to not have it around me. Okay?
Right. Yeah. Out of sight, out of mind, right?
Out of sight, out of mind. Out of sight, out of mind. Now, it doesn't work 100% of the time. You can't always be when I go into this, I live in the country, but I often go into the city. I live near Boston. And whenever I go into Boston, it just strikes me that sugar is everywhere.
Yes. Vying for your attention.
And so one thing I say is, there is no silver bullet. There's no single strategy. Being away from the things that tempt you, I think, is a helpful piece of the puzzle. Then you also have to deal with, how do I deal with the temptation, the stimulus, whatever it is, whether it's the food, the alcohol, Facebook, anything that you use the term pull at you. I like that because it does feel like it's pulling at you.
Yeah.
One thing you can do is you can practice mindfulness, right? And I don't care about whether you think of it as a spiritual practice or not. There's some very practical aspects to mindfulness. Here's one exercise, and I'll give a little plug to my course, Tap Into Mindfulness. You can go to tapintomindfulness.com, and it's really a series of exercises that you practice with your smartphone in hand to start developing different ways of habitually interacting with your phone. Now, I think everyone can relate to the experience of feeling pulled by your phone. When I speak to people, it's a very common way of describing the feeling. So the very first exercise in the course is to take your phone, have it turned off, or at least have the screen off, have it be asleep. And as I pick up my phone now, I actually see it wake up. That's a design feature. It wasn't always this way. They're designed to wake up now when you lift them up. Why? To tempt you to dive into them. Okay. So you may have to turn your phone off to either pick it up or just leave it on your desk, turned off, and look at it. And pay attention to how you feel. If you've ever done any mindfulness meditation, this will feel similar to you. Why? Because my instruction would be, pay attention, for example, to what you're feeling in your body right now, looking at this thing. And I may ask you, Brian and Keone, to share if you might be vulnerable.
Yeah, an anxious, burning desire to grab the thing.
Okay,
yeah, I do too. I got a lot of stuff I got to look at.
It's pretty.
Yeah, burning. I mean, that's a very strong feeling. And how about in your body? What form is it taking? Is there any particular place you're feeling anything?
I certainly feel like in the pit of my stomach, that kind of anxiety.
Pit of your stomach. I mean, I feel it in my chest. You might feel your palms sweating, maybe some shaking. One thing that's useful about this is you can then pause and step back. When you're feeling the pull, you can step back and look at the phone and say, what is that pulling? Is the phone actually literally pulling me? I think we can all realize now, not interacting with it, that the phone isn't pulling us.
Oh, I'm glad you said that because it certainly feels that way.
It feels that, but that's an important insight.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, no, it is.
With the fact that you feel the pull,
right?
the feeling is very real.
Yeah.
But it doesn't, you know, we often distinguish between a feeling that's real and whether what it's telling us is true. Okay, that sensation is real, but it's what the feeling, what our mind and our body is telling us, namely, I have to use the phone, isn't true. It's by pausing, though, for 30 seconds, a minute. You could do this for 10 minutes. It gives you that space to get in touch with and really start to feel the reality of the unreality of the pull. Because so often we feel the pull and do what? React to it, just like you react to the punch coming by instinctively blocking. You react to the food by start shoveling it in your mouth. Right. When you don't pause and you just act on the feeling, you don't get the opportunity to dive deeper into what's behind that feeling, whether what it's telling you is true. And you don't get the opportunity to practice replacing your habitual reaction, picking up the phone, eating the food, doing whatever, with a different reaction. And you can practice different reactions. Now, I'll give you one. You can see it because you're seeing me now. The listeners won't, but I'll describe it. You know, when I first started developing the techniques for the course, I started paying attention to what were my, what started the rabbit hole for me. You know, and I realized it was actually much earlier in the process than I thought. It started with picking up the phone. Often, once I picked up the phone, it was then an automatic loop of wake it up, go to an app, start using it. And I found if I could interrupt myself at the point of picking up the phone, I could short circuit it. So I used to keep my phone in my pocket. Now I've gotten a little nervous about, you know, health effects of that. So I often have it on my desk. So here's what I practice. I mean, I'll hold up. I practice reach for the phone, stop before my hand grabs it, and then pull my hand away. And I do this like a rep training in the gym. Reach, stop, pull my hand away. Reach, stop, pull my hand away. 10, 20 times. Did that for a couple of weeks. Now I have to maintain it. You know, like any exercise, you don't just do it once. You do have to maintain it over time. I found that now, if I do, and it still does happen to me, that I will mindlessly reach for the phone in response to that feeling of a pull. But most of the time, and I'm not going to say I'm perfect, most of the time I pause, and that habit that I train now, which is both mental and physical, right? I've trained the physical pause, and this is very important, will kick in, and I'll stop. And at least then I'll have a second to ask myself, do I really want to pick up that phone right now or not? And one thing I stress to people is the point is not to practice abstinence or deny yourself the ability to use the phone. You know, it's not about stopping using it. It's about making a choice that is more conscious and intentional. You may pause and decide, yeah, I do want to use the phone. Yeah, I do want to play a game. It doesn't have to be something, you know, high-minded, but at least you'll be making a conscious choice to do it. And in the course, I step through a series of different types of interactions like this. They get more and more advanced. But you know what? You can practice this all on your own. Find out what's the trigger for you. Just pay attention throughout your day. It could be not necessarily at the beginning of an interaction. It could be after one. You know, you're watching videos. You start one, and then you start another one. You could practice pausing at the end of a video.
Right.
And ask yourself, do I want to watch the next one? Practice that over and over again. You want to do it quickly. Some of these things sound silly when you say them. Pick a video, fast forward to the last few seconds so that you watch a few seconds of it, and then it stops. And then you practice. Do I want to watch another one? Do that 10, 20 times in a row. Right. It sounds silly, but is it any sillier than what we all actually do? Yeah. You know, which is watch 20 cat videos in a row.
Right. Cat videos. Yeah, that's a pull for me. Cat videos.
You know? Whatever it is. And so when I say there's no magic bullet, you know, I also advocate having times when the phone's not in the room with you. I advocate reconfiguring your apps and devices. Video is a great example. You know, a lot of people don't know in YouTube or Netflix, you can turn off the autoplay feature, which automatically starts a video after the previous one finishes. It's not always the easiest to find. You may have to dig through the settings But I'll tell you, there's a huge bang for your buck in just turning that autoplay off. If you find that you're a person who gets sucked into videos, and most people are. Why?
Yeah.
Because it's designed to work that way.
Right.
Yeah, I'm absolutely.
Or turn your notifications off, whatever. I mean,
Yeah.
wherever that may be. But
So,
yeah.
So Robert, the big thing there with that exercise is taking the time to practice the pause, essentially, is what you're saying. Because I found even and I'm a perfect example of what you're talking about. If I'm writing a paper or working on some homework, I basically get to a point and I know it's a point in every sentence where I just stop typing. I've kind of reached the end and I don't really know where to continue. And the next thing I know is I hit Control T and I already type FA and Facebook's populated and I just hit enter and I'm already there. And I've done that so much so that I'll be on Facebook and I'll type in the space bar Facebook to go to Facebook while I'm on Facebook out of habitual, just hit the enter button and try and get a new, little brain fix there. It's ridiculous. So that pause is something certainly that I should start developing.
Yeah. And one reason I developed this, was that I found there's a lot of people out there teaching mindfulness. A lot of the mindfulness practice is great, but a lot of it is purely internal, and it doesn't involve practicing the physical pausing.
Mm-hmm.
And I hear people suggesting, and it's a great suggestion, if you find yourself sucked in to things, well, during the day, pause. It's one thing to know intellectually that you should pause. It's another thing to actually do it.
Mm-hmm.
And I found that, at least for me, and probably for 99% of people, if you don't practice pausing, it's going to be hard to actually do it when you're in the middle of a hectic day, when when you finish writing for a half an hour, what's happening? You're tired, your willpower's been drained, you've just used a lot of mental energy. You're in a state of mind that makes you susceptible to either internally triggering yourself to go to Facebook or to reacting to something that pops up.
Yeah.
You're in a moment of, we can call it weakness or
Mm-hmm.
susceptibility, whatever it is. That's when it's most important to have practiced ahead of time. Otherwise, you're going to be very unlikely to actually pause, even though your rational brain knows that you should.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the tired athlete in the middle of the game there. You're just reverting back to your training. So it's absolutely important to practice that pause. It's great.
Yeah. And the fact is, none of us practiced using the phone the way we use it now.
Yeah.
We developed our habits just by reacting instinctively to them in the way that they were designed to elicit reactions from us.
Mm-hmm.
And this is one thing I like to tell people is, a lot of us can feel self-judgment about how we use things. We feel bad afterwards when we're sucked in for an hour or two doing something that we didn't intend to do. And, I ask people, try to be easy on yourself. The technology is designed to be maximally seductive. And I'm not being a conspiracy theorist here. It's been very well documented.
Yeah.
I always recommend people read. Nicholas Carr has been documenting how Google and the other big tech companies use neuroscience and, eye tracking testing and all kinds of testing to maximize the pull feature of websites. And it's in their best interest to do that. So we're working against very powerful forces that are designed to tap into the low-level, primitive, like reptilian parts of our brain that react based on gut and feeling, fight or flight, which the phone really does trigger. Not just fight or flight. A lot of what pulls us in is not the negative. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it's fear of missing out. It might be fear. But a lot of times it's positive. You go on to Facebook, I bet, because you want to see what your friends are up to, or you want to share something positive with them. There's a lot of positive pull. There's nothing wrong with that. What can be unhealthy and leave us feeling regret, like when we eat too much or eat too much sugar or anything else that can be good in moderation or at the right time, is when we do it at a time when we didn't want to, or we go too far in a way that's imbalanced.
Yeah.
And that's, again, where the pause and mindfulness can come into play.
Yeah. So just practicing the pause, which you can use in almost, what you're saying is I see this applicable to any aspect of your life, really. You know, so with people with addiction disorders, this is huge, right?
Yeah.
Practicing the pause, or some people with cigarette smoking, I've heard, got a lot of usefulness out of, well, before you actually pick up the cigarette and smoke, go through what it actually feels like to pick it up and smoke, and then make your decision if you're actually going to pick it up and smoke.
Yes.
And once you get the body feel for it. So yeah, this is it's interesting, and it's useful in every aspect of our life, it seems.
Yeah, in fact, our brains can trick us. And I know smoking, Judd Brewer, who was at the Center for Mindfulness for many years, and now he's at his own company, Claritas Mind Sciences. He is a neuroscientist. He is an addiction expert, and he has really pioneered the use of mindfulness for treating smoking addiction specifically. And I know he's someone who brings people in. He tells a funny story. He'll bring people in for the first time trying to quit smoking. And he'll say, okay, I want you to pick up a cigarette and light it and smoke. And they say, what do you mean? I'm here to quit smoking.
Right.
And people have been smoking for 20 years, light up, they smoke it. And he says, I want you to really pay deep, close attention how it feels. And they say, you know what? It doesn't feel that good. And I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah.
Because I respond to the pull and I smoke, I do it somewhat mindlessly. It does satisfy a craving that I have, but the actual experience doesn't feel good. You can do the same thing with your internet and phone use, which is, if you can pause in the middle of video game playing, social media use, video watching, whatever the thing happened, if you can pause in the middle, one thing you can do is ask yourself, do I want to continue? Another is you can just pause and ask, how do I actually feel?
Right.
And I'll tell you one thing I often feel is a kind of jittery anxiety in the middle of one of those things. There is some positive aspect to it, but there's also a kind of amped up high energy feeling that doesn't feel very good. And you know what? If you forget to pause in the middle, for all of us, there's some point at which we reach the end of that little binge. You can then ask yourself afterwards, how do I feel right now?
Right.
And you may then become aware for the first time that this thing that you went into because your brain was telling you this is going to feel really good actually feels compulsive or compelling, or like you're scratching an itch, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the experience feels good while you're doing it or after the fact.
Right.
Yeah, you feel used by the technology.
Yeah, and if you can somehow practice calling that to mind beforehand, and you need to practice. It's one of the ways you can use mindfulness, is to pause and remember what it felt like after the last time you engaged in the thing that you're feeling pulled to engage in now. It's a way of trying to use both your reptilian brain and the more evolved, logical, rational parts of your brain, which otherwise are short-circuited by these craving response cycles. It's very hard otherwise to use your rational brain, your prefrontal cortex, to stop you if you haven't practiced using it in this way, because the primitive brain is just so much stronger, has such a stronger pull in response to these cravings.
Yeah.
Hey, Robert, and when you say pause, you're just talking about even a momentary pause, right? Just so you can reset, I guess, right?
It can be very brief. It's amazing how brief it can be. And I'll give something that's a little bit different, but I'll show you how brief it can be. It's a different type of exercise. If you're feeling that amped up energy, you can do this along with me. You can take one deep breath. All right, here we're going to do it. Okay. Breathe in. Pause. And just let yourself exhale. Okay, now did it take 6 or 7 seconds, maybe? Not even 10 seconds?
Yeah.
Did it make any difference in how you feel?
Well, yeah, it does. If you take it, it is a reset for me, right? Because you take in some fresh air, you're rejuvenating your brain, you're oxygenating your cells. It helps you reset and helps you think clearer about
not picking up that phone,
or doing anything that may not be in your best interest.
Yeah, You know, I think sometimes people make, what is the saying, make the perfect the enemy of the good. They think, oh, I can't sit down and meditate for an hour, so I'm not going to do anything.
Right.
But you could pause for a moment, as you said. You could take one deep breath. And, if you work with people in sports or with other things, that's how you get on the path towards improvement. You start with one step. If you can't do a push, work on doing a half a push-up.
Right.
And then you work on doing a push-up. And it has a real snowball effect. This is where you can have the virtuous cycle rather than that addictive feedback loop cycle that leaves you feeling like you've just eaten a bunch of empty calories. Even setting that very minimal goal for yourself, a moment's pause, one deep breath, one push-up, you both gain the skill, but you gain that positive feeling about yourself that you've been able to do it.
Right.
And that can give you the motivation to continue. The one trap, though, which I'm sure everyone's aware of if they've gone down this path, be prepared to slip back and to have the same mindset when you slip back as when you started, right? And not let the perfect be the enemy of the good. It's easy to say, we'll do one push-up today, I do 2 push-ups tomorrow. At the end of the year, I'll be able to do 365 push-ups in a row.
Right.
Yeah.
Or I'm going to do it every day. You know what? You're going to miss a day. You're going to fall back. You might get injured. You might forget. There'll be all kinds of steps backward. That's another time to pause.
Right.
If you find your mind judging yourself or saying, I'm a loser, I'm a failure, I'll never succeed at this, what was I kidding myself about? That's the time to pause and say that feeling feels real, but the story my mind's telling me is not necessarily true.
Right.
But you can only get there by pausing. If you don't pause, what's going to happen? You'll get yourself wrapped up going down a path of just following that feeling, and you might give up. I mean, mindfulness is a lifelong practice. Training in any kind of exercise, sport, lifelong. All these things are lifelong, and you go up and down, left and right, backwards and forwards.
Right.
And the key thing is to keep with it.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's powerful in any aspect of your life. It reminds me of a story that I told on one of our podcasts, and it was the story where I was rushing out to get to my office, and my wife, who's always just taking her time, at least she was at that time, right? Again, she's like, I'm like, come on, Jillian, hurry up, get to the car, and I throw my bag on the roof and get in the car. We slam, we pull off, go away, and then I get behind somebody who's slowing down, like braking their car, right? And I'm like, what is this guy doing? He's like, of course, I go to the reactive places. This guy's out to get me, to ruin my day.
That's right.
Because I got to get to work. And then he stops completely. I'm like, Jillian, now I'm going to have to fight this guy. Now I'm going to have to fight this guy. I mean, this guy's one of the best teachers. I don't even know his name. He's my favorite teacher in the whole world. And I don't know his name. He gets out of the car and says, hey, your computer's on the roof of your car. I just want to let you know that. So this is the thing, the stop and pause, the road rage, or the thing, the illogical thinking that, somebody cut you off in traffic, that they're out to get you, is ridiculous too, right? I mean,
it's ridiculous. And this is, I've been talking about a more practical form of mindfulness involving training your mind and body. But, I'm newer, to be honest, to pure mindfulness meditation. I've been doing it seriously for about 5 years. And this is one of the great benefits I found, is it gives you the opportunity to just see the stories your mind generates.
Right. Right. And where you automatically go, and you can change that story if you pause.
Yeah. You can change the
story. You can see how illogical your stories are.
Yes.
In a lot of cases.
Yeah. And, you can see how, one of the aspects of mindfulness practice is what's sometimes called non-identification, which is a fancy word to mean I can recognize that my mind has a thought, but that doesn't mean I am the thought, right? I can take it a step back from it. And, you can see that the mind is almost like people call it monkey mind, right? Your mind generates these thoughts. It's easy to feel like you're making them happen. You're generating your thoughts. You're in control of your mind. Now, there's some truth that you can influence what your mind does, but to a large extent, our minds are like an engine of generating. There's a great skit, you can all look it up online, Norm Macdonald, comedian. I'm not going to be able to deliver this like him, but I'll just give a little bit of it, which is, I heard a study that men think about sex every 7 seconds. He's like, that's not true. Here's what my mind's doing every 7 seconds. I'm walking down the street and I see a guy with cowboy boots. I think, that's interesting, cowboy boots. Who's wearing cowboy boots these days? And what am I going to eat for lunch later today? He goes on basically it's like my mind just generates an endless stream of gibberish. Right. And he does it a much more funny way than me. But I thought, like, that's a great mindfulness lesson.
Yeah.
If you can step back, and people talk about like almost watching your thoughts like a movie.
Right.
So that you're not in it, but you can observe them, and it helps to not identify with them and do what we're all doing now, which is just laugh at ourselves a little bit at the absurdity of what's going through our minds all
Yeah. Yeah,
and
absolutely.
not get sucked into it or wrapped up in it and feel like you said, oh, my mind's saying this guy's a jerk, I have to fight him, therefore I have to do it, therefore act on it.
That's right. That's right. And think about that. That can be life-saving for people, right?
It can be life-saving. It can be
just that little pause.
And you can have all kinds of violent thoughts you're not proud of, in many ways, that you wouldn't necessarily share with someone. It doesn't mean you're a bad person. It doesn't mean you have to act on them. It doesn't define who you are. And it's helpful to just know that everyone's in the same boat also, right? Your instinct might be fight, someone else might be flight, and someone else might be freeze or fear or whatever else. We may not have the exact same thoughts, but we are in the same boat in that we all have our own individual triggers that we react to and that we have to deal with.
Right. Yeah. Well, Robert, what about technology, certain, I don't know, apps or things we can use with the computer that can help us with this?
Yeah. I mean, here's a very simple thing, which is closely related to taking a pause. All kinds of apps out there that will notify you, remind you to pause.
Yeah.
Ring a bell.
Right.
And might even pop up a message saying, stop, take a breath. I think this is a really great use of technology to subvert the distracting aspect of technology. There has to be a balance, right? If it's beeping at you every 5 minutes, you're gonna sabotage yourself. So you have to find a balance. But any kind of reminder you can have to pause. And I think, Brian, you're talking about you feeling tired from writing and wanting to go on Facebook. That may not necessarily be a bad thing. There's a technique you may have heard of called the Pomodoro technique. I've tried it. Some people swear by it. I've tried it on and off. It basically means working for an amount of time, like 25 minutes, and then taking a micro break for 5 minutes. You can play around with the amount of time of the work segment versus the pause segment. But in the old days, people would set a little egg timer, but now you can put an app on your phone. There's all kinds of Pomodoro websites with all kinds of bells and whistles. Yeah. But the basic idea is it's to acknowledge the fact that we're not machines. We can't work nonstop for 5 hours in a row. Our brains will get tired. And then you can choose what to use the pause time for. Maybe for you, it's okay to spend those 5 minutes going on Facebook, If when the timer then tells you now you're back to your 25 or 55 minute work period, you train yourself to be responsive to that and get back to work.
Yeah.
And then this illustrates the fact that a lot of this is about balance. A lot of it's about knowing yourself. What works for one person may not work for others. I love a website, an app called Focus at Will. It uses music to help you focus. There's lots of other sites out there. There's calm.com and the Calm app, all kinds of music and sound apps out there. Insight Timer, which has meditations, also has all kinds of sounds for focus, for productivity, for sleeping, for waking up in the morning. What I like about Focus at Will is it has some neuroscience backing behind it. They found that different types of music are better for different types of people. I was surprised to hear they found if you're a really high energy person, that very often high energy music will help you stay focused and grounded.
Yeah.
I'm more of a moderate type of energy person. I use waterfall sounds, for me.
Yeah.
But when I say you have to know yourself, I'd say go check it out. Try out different sounds, try working or exercising or whatever you want to use that music for, and see what works best for you. Don't use water sounds because Robert Plotkin said he uses water sounds.
Right.
Maybe it's images for you. Maybe it's something else. But the variety of technology that's out there now that you can use for that purpose and customize for your own use. I mean, Focus at Will also has a timer. So it's a little bit like the Pomodoro technique. I know if I both have 30 minutes available to work on something, I can set the timer. And I know then I don't have to keep looking at the clock.
Right.
I can relax and be assured that I won't miss my next appointment because I got too wrapped up. I know that that music will stop and a bell will sound at the end. I also use it. I have a little bit of an internal competitive self, which I think is okay as long as I don't let it get too out of control. If I feel like, I could get this task done in 20 minutes, let me set a timer for 15 minutes.
Right.
And I really try to hold myself to that. And when I do it, I feel good about myself, You may not like that competitive side, or it may not be who you are. If it's not, then don't do it that way. But the point is, there are so many options for you to use technology for your own benefit to help you use your time the way you want to. It's the only features of technology aren't all the distracting, stressful, mind-sucking, soul-sucking ones that we started talking about.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Which, you mentioned something earlier in the podcast, Robert, about your willpower battery. So that the pause, I guess, helps strengthen that in little brief bursts, I guess, right?
I think so. And I think that what you do, if you do take a longer pause, find what works for you. I mean, I like to stand up, move around, stretch a little bit, not in a strenuous exercise way, like doing any martial arts stretching, just to get up and move. I mean, I don't know about you, in my workday, I'm generally sitting at a desk for many, many hours.
Yeah, me too.
So for me, I do have a standing desk. I alternate between the sitting desk and the standing desk. But, I know for a while, standing desks became like a panacea. And whenever people are touting something as the magic pill, it's probably not true. But there may be some truth to it. And that's how I feel about standing desks. I use it for certain type of work. I use it for a certain amount of time. I found if I'm standing for 2 hours at the standing desk, it's not very comfortable either. So it's a matter of, but sometimes I'll go and switch at the end of a 30-minute period from the sitting to the standing desk. Or some people find they might want to take that short break to actually do something more energetic. If your day is actually spent being really physically active, you might want to sit at a desk for 5 minutes for your pause.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of these things where there's some studies out now about the internet and Facebook, social media causing lots of anxiety, lots of depression. And I think it ultimately results from, or in part results from, feeling not productive, right? Not setting out, you have a focus, you're not doing what you want to get done. And it's all about, work. But what you're also saying, if we focus on the rest part of, the pause, the rest, maybe even bigger, getting plenty of sleep, you actually are more productive at the end of the day. And rest is not a lazy term or a bad thing. It actually helps you be more.
People have plotted out productivity, and have found, so our brain can tell us, look, I went to MIT and this was the culture at MIT.
Yeah.
The more you worked nonstop, the better you were. And it was a very competitive environment. People wore the badge of honor. You know, I just worked 20 hours in a row, all-nighter. Oh, you did an all-nighter? I just did 2 all-nighters in a row. It was it was a competition for how long could you work in a row without stopping. But actually, if you want to be scientific about it, there's been a lot of study of this. If you picture the curve, it's like a bell curve. Either your productivity or like a ski slope. your productivity can start at and then plummet over time. If you really want to maximize your productivity, you need to take breaks. You need to take breaks. I've noticed this, you can keep going and maybe you have several hours, 4, 5, 6 hours that are productive. You're taking breaks in the middle. At a certain point, even the breaks are not going to be able to keep you being productive. And you might spend, I'm just going to put in 1 more hour. That last hour can have about as much productivity as it can have a very low amount of productivity. You may only get 5 real minutes of work done.
Right.
Last hour, you need to know when to call it quits.
Right. We're talking about quantities, not what you want. You want quality work, right? So it's better, so what? You pulled an all-nighter, but how much did you actually get done? And how much of that was actually good work?
How much of it was good work? So, I know there's a debate in the mindfulness world about should we be using mindfulness for these practical ends like productivity. But I'd say even if you are only interested in something like mindfulness or pausing or breathing for productivity purposes, you have to know that you're probably fooling yourself if you believe that you just keep getting more productive. In fact, even something like multitasking. People have studied multitasking and found that people who self-report as being good multitaskers are the worst at multitasking productively. And you can track it. So I'm a lawyer, and I remember when I started as a lawyer, the first time I had to track my billable hours by the 10th of an hour. Yeah. And is kind of a harsh lesson in how much time it actually took me to do things. And I found I was wildly inaccurate. And most people who first do that exercise of tracking their, how long is it going to take you to do? I can knock that off in 15 minutes. Right. You know what? Might take you 2 hours. And sometimes it's in the opposite direction. You think something's going to take you a really long time. When you sit down to do it, you can do it much more quickly. We are very, very inaccurate in understanding our own productivity. So try tracking it. So you ask, what can you do with technology? It's another thing you can do with technology. It's a lot of ways. I'm not big into what they call quantified self, Fitbit and other things myself personally, but you can do it. You can try it. You can track your productivity, even in more low-tech ways. And if you're brutally honest with yourself, one way you can do it, maybe the two of you do it with each other, have a friend, keep you honest, or a coworker, or someone else you have to report to. It's so easy to lie to yourself. Here's an easy lie about productivity. You don't count the transition time between tasks. You don't count the startup time. You don't count the time when you were kind of twiddling your thumbs, getting yourself in gear.
Right.
You have to count. Those are actual minutes in your actual day of your actual life.
Right.
You can't just pretend they don't exist. Yeah. And so keep yourself brutally honest. Have someone else hold you accountable and do it. And when you do that, I bet you'll find that your productivity isn't what you think it is. Maybe in both directions, but whatever you do, you'll have a more objective understanding of how you spend your time. And in particular, I think you're right. You'll find you don't stay productive for as long as you think. And it's much better to cut your losses at a certain point of the day, get your rest, have your fun, eat food, use the bathroom, do all those things you weren't doing throughout the day, attend to your physical body, which you may have forgotten that you have, and come back tomorrow.
And it's interesting, Robert, maybe some of that time, that rest, because I've read some of the creativity studies, right, where that time where you're not focused actually may give you new insights and ideas that where you feel like it's not focused work may actually, really enhance and give you new ideas about the project you have at hand, whatever that may be.
Yeah, there was a old essay, because this is Bertrand Russell. I want to say it was in the 1920s. So this is long before technology. In praise of idleness. In praise of idleness.
Right.
I bet you can find it online. The copyright's probably expired. But this is before the neuroscience backed it up. But he said the same thing. You have the most creative, insightful moments when you're walking in the woods, when you're doing something else. You know, when you set your mind to something, maybe during one of those focus times, but then you take your mind off of it.
Right.
And, you know, in our lives today, if we're always engaged in doing something that we're paying close attention to, our work, then on the phone, then on the phone while we're eating a meal, and there's never a moment when we're letting our idle brain just mull on things in the background, you know, we're not going to have those deep insights. I found it in my own life, you know, those eureka kind of aha moments, they sneak up on you when you're not expecting it. Sometimes I don't even notice them in the moment. Sometimes it's later. Or I have the thought, I don't realize it's a big deal. And then I mention it to someone, and someone else tells me, you know what, that is kind of a big deal.
Yeah. Great. Wow. Yeah, I mean, I can relate.
Yeah,
totally. Wow. Well, Robert, thanks so much for being on. I really appreciate it. Before we get off, how can people find you?
Yeah.
And how can they get on? I mean, I think you have a podcast also, and you have
a podcast. Yeah. The easy place is technologyformindfulness.com.
Okay.
That's the hub for the blog, for the podcast, for the Tap Into Mindfulness course.
Okay.
It's all there. We are on Facebook. We are on Twitter. We are on LinkedIn for professionals. We try to be very mindful about how we use social media. You know, we don't bombard people with things too much, but we do use it as an outreach tool and to communicate with our community. So technologyformindfulness.com is the way to always get in touch with us and find out about what we're doing.
Yeah, that was my last question for you, Robert, is since you have a podcast, you're doing all these things, you're online, quite literally. What, if anything, that you didn't share, do you take into your own specific routine to kind of ensure mindfulness and productivity around these tools, social media mainly?
Yeah, I wake up and meditate first thing, actually still in bed, you know. Some people advise against that. I sit up in bed. One reason why is it kind of is a habit for making sure I don't do anything else before I meditate. I have a bit of a fear that if I even let myself stand up out of bed, I'd reach for the phone or do something without technology productive without getting that initial groundedness. So this is part about knowing yourself. First thing, and it's usually for me a pretty short amount of time, but that helps me really ground myself during the day. Just one other tip is in terms of productivity, I use the end of the day to step back in a calm moment, 5-10 minutes, to look at what I didn't accomplish and plan for the next day. I find it's the end of the day when I have that time and ability to do it. And I know that I'll be able to, one, it eases my anxiety for the rest of the night.
Yeah.
About what's facing me in the morning, instead of waking up and feeling that feeling of, I don't even know what I'm going to need to plan to do today.
Yeah.
I can know I've handled it. Now, the day may go off the rails, 2 minutes into the day, but at least I start out knowing, and that eases the stress. So I'm a big believer in using the end of the day to, it's also a calmer time generally. I mean, I know for a lot of us, there is no true end of the day anymore.
Unfortunately.
But whatever I pick for my end of the day, is the time that I use. I find it's less stressful. I often find that once I get started in the morning, whenever that is, it already feels like things have gotten away from me.
Right.
So doing it the night before is a way where I can feel like I've got some control over stopping that from happening.
Okay. Yeah, great. So those two pillars, really, just waking up and immediately meditating, and then at the end of the day, planning the next day.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's right. And
which are pauses, which are like pauses.
Yeah. They're both pauses. And then I kind of put the day, the productivity work focused part of my day to bed at the end of the day once I've done that planning.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. Thank you, Rob. This is great.
Yeah, absolutely.
Incredible. I love the work that you're doing. I love it. So everybody, you guys can find Robert, Technology for Mindfulness, on Twitter. His website is Technology for Mindfulness. Check him out. I definitely will.
Thanks so much,
Yes.
Brian. Thanks, Keone. It's really been a blast. I've enjoyed it a lot.
Thank you. We really appreciate it. Take care. We'll let you know. We'll post everything up and all the links, and we'll be set to go with you in 5 or 6 weeks.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank
Bye
you.
now. Bye.
Thanks, Robert.